Welcome! Let's talk about predicting the Vancouver Canucks off-season. Now, I'm shooting this video series in reverse alphabetical order of all 31 NHL teams. Last team I reviewed was the Vegas Golden Knights there. The next will be the Toronto Maple Leafs. I'll also put up a few links up top of the last few clubs that I shot. Now, the cap's going to be $81.5 million, stagnant for next season, and maybe even for a couple of seasons after that due to COVID-19. The Canucks, they have about $17 million to play with, but they can't exactly blow that because after next season, they're going to have to sign Quinn, Hughes, and Pettersson, and those guys aren't inking any short-term sweetheart deals. They're going to be heavy, big-buck, long-term contracts. And the three biggest UFAs the Vancouver has right now are, of course, goalie Jacob Markstrom, a defenseman right shot D Christopher Tanev, and of course Tyler Toffoli, the winger they traded for from the LA Kings, who they gave up a ransom for. So let's start with the goaltenders first. Now, Louis Dominique, their third-string goalie, who was brought in through a trade because Markstrom was hurt during the regular season. He's probably walking. He's 28 years old, making just over $1 million. Markstrom! He's been improving over the past couple seasons and has had a really decent playoffs until he got injured. And then Thatcher Demko stepped in and was amazing! Is amazing! I'm shooting this just before Game 7 starts between Vegas and Vancouver. He's had a .990 save percentage so far. And he's stopping like 40 shots-ish a game. Maybe he's arrived. And perhaps this gives Vancouver huge leverage when it comes to contract negotiations with Markstrom. Because they can say, hey, we need you to take a team-friendly deal. Otherwise, we're going to have to go in a different direction. And you can go to the UFA market. And why not? You know, I mean, Vancouver, well, Demko. English. Markstrom is probably going to require north of $6 million in term on his next deal, right? They can probably go to the goalie UFA market, which there are a plethora of right now, and get someone pretty decent between $3 and $4.5 million. Not to mention that after next season is the expansion draft, and they could very well lose one of those goalies, be it Demko or Markstrom. So if I'm the Canucks, I'm like, well, if Demko is this good and he continues to be this good in the playoffs, why not walk from Markstrom, save a few $1 million on a UFA, and if Seattle picks one of them, so be it. Now, let's take a quick look at some of the UFA goalies who might fit the bill here. And I know I mentioned his name a lot, but Anton Khudobin, who's been pretty good for Dallas in these playoffs and for a few years now. Not to mention Thomas Greiss from the Islanders. He's a UFA as well. Now, both those guys, there's an asterisk here. They come from defense-orientated teams who really keep the high danger chances very low. So you don't know how these two goalies are going to fare with different styles. But we'll see how that shakes out. There's also Cam Talbot as well, who's had a nice rebound year with the Edmonton Oilers. For the most part, played really well in the playoffs until that last game there with the Oilers, with the Calgary Flames. And maybe even Corey Crawford for the Chicago Blackhawks. Yeah, he's 35, and he's been declining for quite some years now, but he just had a nice bounce-back year with a .917 save percentage and was pretty good in the playoffs too. And if Seattle takes one of these goalies, oh well. You still have Demko, who at this point, at time of filming, looks pretty awesome. Now, let's move on to the defense here. Let's talk about them. Starting with Christopher Tanev, the right shot defenseman. He's 30 years old, making just over $4.4 million. He adds the grit. He's a nice defensive defenseman. He checks hard. He blocks shots. The Canucks really don't have another defenseman like that. Who could just fill his shoes very easily. And he's fit perfectly in with Quinn Hughes. Now, if Markstrom walks, maybe they think of signing Tanev. Otherwise, he may be the odd man out. And we'll get into a few other prospects we could talk about in a second too. But the other UFA on defense is Oscar Fantenberg, who fills in nicely in the bottom pairing. He plays arguably better than Jordy Ben, who has been sitting out some games. I would think if they can get Fantenberg for a very cheap price, like what he's making now at around $850,000, he's 28 years old, by the way, then he might stay. Then there's an RFA with arbitration rights in Troy Stecher, who's playing second pairing defenseman duties with Edler right now. And if Tanev leaves, it's either Myers or Stecher who jumps up to playing with Hughes. And, I mean, Stecher plays around 16 minutes a game. Maybe he's ready for it. I mean, he's still youngish, 26 years old. Tyler Myers, the $6 million man for the next 4 years at age 30, I'm not sure I trust him as on first pairing minutes unless he actively changes his game a bit and really just focuses on the defensive end and just lets Quinn Hughes have all the fun. We'll see what happens. Now, there's some prospects here that Vancouver can bring in. And right off the bat, there's Brogan Rafferty, right shot defenseman who's 24, 25, 6'2". He's been playing in the AHL. Had a really good season there, both offensively and defensively. And at the very least, could be a seventh defenseman. But if Tanev leaves, he probably will step in the bottom pairing, I would think. And then, don't forget about Olli Juolevi, who has gone through a bunch of injuries over the past couple of years, has had a slow development. He's 21, 22 years old, 6'3", has been applying his trade in the AHL over the past little while. He could get a really hard look in training camp. He's a left shot defenseman, by the way. And maybe you see Rafferty and Juolevi in the bottom pairing to start the season. And hopefully, again, if Tanev leaves, you see one of those guys move up in the lineup, or both. Ideally. I mean, I think Edler has got, one more year in his contract at $6 million, and then he's done. Is there any other defenseman I want to talk about here? I don't think so. Jet Wu is probably going to spend next year in the AHL, I would think, after finishing up in the WHL. Let's move on to the forward group here, and let's start first with Tyler Toffoli, who's coming off a $4.6 million contract. He's 28 years old, plays both wings, fit in really well in that top six. He was a point per game in the few games during the regular season that he did play with them, and in the playoffs, at this moment, he's about 4 points, 2 goals, 2 assists in 6 games. And he's coming off an injury. I'm sure he'll probably get better and better. Former Stanley Cup champion. Brings a lot of experience to that top six. If either Markstrom or Tanev walks, why wouldn't they bring Toffoli back? There are some other forward players we could talk about that they might bring in on the cheap. But if they're serious about taking a long run in the playoffs, he can definitely help push them over the hump. Now, one might say, well, what about Vasily Podolskin? Well, if I'm saying that properly. Now, he's got 1 more year in the KHL under contract. However, he could be finished, if they finish on time, by the way, by May 1st. And maybe, just maybe, he could join the Canucks for the last bit of the regular season and even the playoffs. He could step into the lineup. He mostly plays right wing, by the way. He's 19 right now, 6'1", 196 pounds. Their former first-round draft pick from last year. Then there's also Mark Michaels, the 25-year-old left wing / center German who is 187 pounds. I have him as here as 5 foot. That's got to be 5'9". That's like 5'1". I didn't write 5'1". In any case, in 31 games in the NCAA, he had 20 goals, 44 points, and was a plus 20. He'll get a hard look at training camp too. Obviously, another player they can have on the cheap. Then there's Niels Höglander, who's ranked second on the top 10 of the Vancouver Canucks prospect list, number 27 overall in the NHL by the Hockey News. He's a left winger, about 20 years old, 5'9", plays in Sweden. He was previously ranked 40th overall in the 2019 draft. He could get a good crack at the lineup this fall. He's got a lot of speed, a lot of skill. In 7 games in the World Juniors, he had 11 points. Now, if the Canucks can't sign Toffoli because he wants too much money, too much term, whatever, maybe Podolskin at some point anyway, and even Höglander could help fill that hole in the lineup. Then there's Josh Levo, who's also a UFA, who has been injured the past couple seasons, hasn't played a full season yet for them, can be a useful depth guy. If he wants to re-sign for the right price, maybe Vancouver keeps him. I mean, he's 27 years old right now, and he's coming off a $1.5 million contract. He has got a wicked shot, by the way, and he can even fill in for injuries in the top six like he has in the past. And then, of course, I can't go on without talking about Michael Furland. Because if Tanev leaves, there's not much grit and sandpaper left in the lineup, and Furlan was supposed to supply some of that. But of course, we all know his concussion history. He came back into the playoffs, got into a fight almost right away, back with a concussion again. Maybe he's even pondering a retirement. I mean, he's only 28 years old. He's got 3 more years at $3.5 million. Maybe he's left on the LTIR for quite some time, even if he does show up again. My point being, maybe the Canucks might want to go to the UFA market to find some of that sandpaper, because Kyle Clifford could be a UFA, formerly of the Toronto Maple Leafs and LA Kings. Matt Martin from the New York Islanders, he's a UFA. And then maybe even, why do I keep forgetting his name? Wayne Simmons, that's what I wanted to say. And even Patrick Maroon. In any case, Vancouver Canucks fans, I'd love to hear from you down in the comment section below how you think this team is going to look come the beginning of next season, what changes you think they should make as well. And thank you so much for watching. Please don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and that notification bell, which will alert you when my next video comes out, which will be about, of course, the Toronto Maple Leafs. Thanks again. Please be kind to each other out there, and I'll see you soon.